Uh, Good morning, church. It is great to be able to meet with you, even in this digital space during lockdown. I trust that you are all doing well. Yesterday afternoon, Jonathan and I got together to discuss a question for this Q&A session. Unfortunately, the first minute did not get recorded, and so I just want to introduce the question to you. During this lockdown period, many people have been suffering with some level of depression. And so the question is, how do we handle depression in this lockdown period? And we pick up with a biblical view, and Jonathan opens for us from 1 Kings chapter 19.
1 Kings 19. Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with a sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah saying, "So may the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by this time tomorrow." Then he was afraid, and he arose and ran for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat under a broom tree. And he asked that he might die, saying, "It is enough, now, Lord, O Lord, take my life, for I am no better than my fathers." And he lay down and slept under a broom tree. And behold, an angel touched him and said to him, "Arise and eat." And he looked, and behold, there was at his head a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. And he ate and drank and lay down again. And the angel of the Lord came again a second time and touched him, and said, "Arise and eat, for the journey is too great for you." And he arose and ate and drank and went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mount of God. So the first thing is we see this amazing hero of the faith, this amazing individual who has had this great victory by trusting in the Lord. And he's now depressed. He's now broken because he's looking at the situation. And sometimes we do that. Sometimes we fill ourselves with the negativity of what's going on, with looking at the particular situation, particularly in lockdown. I remember in the beginning of lockdown, I looked at a lot of the stats on, the increasing spread of the virus, and it gets hugely overwhelming. And sometimes it's important not to fill ourselves with that stuff. And this is exactly what Elijah did. He was looking at the situation, he was looking at this threat from Jezebel instead of looking to God. And we see in verse 4 this man that is just hugely depressed. This man that says, "Lord, just take my life now. I want to die. I don't want to go on anymore." And how often is that us, when we get depressed, we get into these moments where we just like, "I don't know if I can go on. I don't know if I can do it anymore." Maybe you're feeling that way. And Elijah offers for us some practical help, some situational needs. We need to stop filling ourselves with excessive stuff. And sometimes that's taking a step back from Facebook and Instagram and other social media, because sometimes it can be really depressing when we're seeing what's going on around us. Not to say that we shouldn't be informed, but there is a limit. And then we see the Lord restore Elijah and give him some really practical help through the angel. The Lord comforts Elijah by giving him food, by making sure he's eating, making sure he's drinking enough, and making sure he's sleeping. We see he falls asleep under this broom tree and has a great nap, and then wakes up to some fresh food, drinks enough, and after that was able to go 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mount of God. And sometimes that's part of what's needed, is for us to get enough sleep, is to eat enough, is to drink enough. We often feel a lot more depressed when we're not rested, when we haven't eaten that day, or even something as simple as drinking enough water can make a huge difference to our emotional well-being.
Yes.
And going on from there, we see the Lord continue to interact with Elijah and continue to restore him. And from verse 9 it says, "There he came to a cave and lodged in it, and behold, the word of the Lord came to him and said to him, 'What are you doing here, Elijah?' And he said, 'I've been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I even I only am left, and they seek my life to take it away. So the Lord's just restored him, just given him food, just helped him again, and again he's just looking at the situation. Again he's looking at the problem at hand instead of looking at this great God that is meeting with him. And this is what God says to him. And he said, "Go out and stand on the mount before the Lord." And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore the mountains and broke in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, the sound of a low whisper. And when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. And behold, there came a voice to him and said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And he said, "I've been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. The people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, killed your prophets, and I, even I only am left, and they seek my life to take it away." And the Lord said to him, "Go and return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael to be king over Assyria." And I'm just going to stop there, because we see the Lord restore him by meeting with him. And that's a huge aspect of overcoming depression, is meeting with the Lord, is coming to his word. And his word's not in this thunder, it's not in this earthquake, it's not in these huge moments, but in that stillness of quieting ourselves before the Lord. And that's huge in overcoming depression. That's huge in just meeting with the Lord. And I just want to go to Philippians as well, just to end off what I'm saying. So Philippians 4, 8-9. "Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things. What you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you." Depressed brother and sister, think of what the Lord has done. Think of his excellence, and instead of looking at the situation, look up, look to God. And I know it's hard, I know it's really tough when you're in that moment, but sleep enough, eat enough, drink enough, spend time with the Lord. And he says here that when we practice these things, think of these things, the God of peace will be with us. Our God will literally give us a peace that surpasses understanding. And whether the depression is medical or whether it's situational, this is a call for all of us to just be seeking God and just trusting him and asking him to help us. And the joy is that he does. Craig, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, John, thank you for sharing that. I think that passage does show us that even this mighty prophet can be almost bipolar in his depression. In my job I also deal a lot with depression, but I think there is often a spiritual component to depression, and I think first of all we need to have a right standing with God. If there is sin within us that is unconfessed and that we haven't dealt with, that is the first. So I want to encourage you, if you have sin in your life that you haven't dealt with, you need to come to God and confess it to him and come into a right relationship with God. That is the most important thing. The second thing that I notice is in verse 10 and verse 14 of that passage that you read. Elijah was very self-focused, and we need to also have our theology right, because as Christians our theology should be God-centered. As soon as we make it me-centered, then when things are not so good and things are going badly, our mood is dependent on that, and we can easily become depressed if our situation is not ideal. But if we are God-centered, then it's not such an issue if we find ourselves in difficulty, because our foundation is God. And when our foundation is God, it's a solid foundation. And if we're giving Him glory and our lives are aimed at giving Him glory, then we're much less prone to depression. But there are some practical steps as well, John, like you said, eating and sleeping. Research definitely shows that if we're not getting enough sleep, that we will become depressed. So I want to encourage you to develop a routine that includes proper sleep, getting to bed early, getting up at a decent time. This will already improves our state of mind. Set yourself daily goals and achievable goals. Like today I'm going to do such and such. It might be a very small goal, but something that you can achieve. I know, Jono, you've been building a coffee table, and that's a project that you can get behind. And I'm sure that you felt good afterwards after having achieved something. Yes. Yeah, so I want to encourage you to look at a project maybe. It could be anything. It doesn't need to be a practical thing. It might be researching something that you're interested in. But I want to encourage you to do that. Then exercise is very important. Scientists always tell us that exercise is a very good antidote for depression. So it doesn't have to be every day. It doesn't have to be Ironman training. Just going for a walk every day, a 2 or 3k walk, can do you the world of good. At the beginning of this lockdown, I was quite depressed and feeling sorry for myself, and I just went for a walk to the shops, and that was all I needed to overcome that depression. So exercise is a very good thing. But Jono, like the passage you were quoting there, food and nutrition is very important. Elijah's meal was fantastic because it sustained him for 40 days.
Yep, wasn't McDonald's.
Yeah, that's quite incredible. So nutritionists tell us that the best food is whole food that's not processed, so cooked from scratch. That will also in itself give you some encouragement and upliftment. But the nutrition that you get from whole foods that are cooked from scratch are the healthiest, and they also help us with combating depression. Yeah. So that's what I have. Yeah.
And sometimes now with the increased freedom, sometimes it's going for a cup of coffee and
Yes.
getting together with someone, maintaining
Yes.
social distancing. But
Yeah.
when we don't have that contact, and particularly when we're working at home, it's needed to sometimes just pick up the phone or go for coffee with someone. It makes a huge difference. We also realize that sometimes there is a medical issue where there's a chemical
Yes.
imbalance, and sometimes there is need to use things for that. I mean, Paul said to Timothy that he needs to have a little wine for his stomach because he evidently had stomach problems.
Yes.
And sometimes we need to use medication because God has given us the knowledge to know how to use these things, and He's allowed us to be able to make and manufacture stuff that can help us, and sometimes that's needed. And if that's you, don't feel discouraged, don't feel like you're a failure. Just realize that God uses even that, and trust in Him in that, and trust Him to work through that, and even free you from that at some point. But don't be discouraged if you fall into the category of being medically depressed.
Yes. And one last thing I was just remembering is that light can also have an effect on us. So get outside, get in the daylight. We need light during the day and dark at night.
Particularly sunlight.
Yes, yeah. Yes. Sunlight, vitamin D is very good for you.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. Thank you, Jono.
Thanks,
Thank
Craig.
you so much.
And thanks, Church, for joining us this morning. We trust this is a blessing. And if you need to chat about anything we've spoken about, or if you need to work through some stuff in terms of depression or anxiety or anything like that, we're available. So if you want to see us, you want to call us, you want to message us, please feel free to do that.
Thank you. And if any of you have questions, feel free to contact any of the elders with your questions so that we can try and answer those.
Yeah, please do. And take care, Church, and we trust that you have a good week.
Bye bye.
Bye.